Welcome back to Bentley House. I'm Ara, and if you're new to the cardboard house project, this is it. We have been working on a house, a dollhouse that has been made from recyclable materials. This has been a great project for anyone stuck at home who really wanted to use some creativity but was unable to get to the craft store. One thing I really love specifically about our channel here is that we're always wanting to know the story behind the miniatures. You guys have been asking me, who lives here? What kind of house is this? What is the story behind the cardboard house? So today I'm going to show you how I made the cardboard house resident. I knew from the beginning I wanted to make someone to live in this house, but when I got the idea to try and make her from recyclable materials as well, it almost became kind of a challenge to see if I could do it. So instead of making her from clay, which is what I made my alchemist doll out of, she is mostly made from toilet paper. Now, a quick disclaimer, in my area of the country, toilet paper is not as hard to find anymore, so I don't feel like using a few squares of toilet paper is taking away from anybody else who has need. Just to put that out there, we're doing okay in the toilet paper department. Her face and her hands and her wings are made from toilet paper and glue put together, kind of like miniature paper mache. So I'm going to walk you through this process of making the miniature fairy that goes inside the cardboard house. So let's get started. My initial design idea for this resident, this fairy, is a mixture between Grandmama Adams and the fairies from Sleeping Beauty. And I wanted her to be whimsical and colorful, but at the same time I wanted her to just be a little bit grumpy and a little bit worn down. So I made her about 4.5 inches. She ends up a little bit taller by the time I'm done. To start making her head, I took a couple toothpicks and I glued them together with some hot glue, and I'm going to wrap some aluminum foil around those toothpicks to get a form to start building the head onto. Now this helps take up some space and it helps me start the paper mache process. I know this isn't actually paper mache, but I'm just gonna call it that for this video. Right now I'm just squishing the foil down so that it's about the size of the head that I drew on my roughly drawn pattern, and then I'm taking the back end of paintbrush and I'm pushing into the foil to create some eye sockets, and this I'm just kind of eyeballing. Now that that's complete, I'm going to take some Elmer's glue. This is just basically PVA glue, and I'm going to brush it all over the aluminum foil, and this is going to be where I start my toilet paper mache. I ended up taking small bits off of the square, and I do end up, not in this shot right here, but I do take the plies apart. So I think this is 2 or 3 ply toilet paper, so I do take it apart and I work with the thinnest sheets possible. This makes it easier to bend and move, and I feel like the glue grabs onto it just a little bit better. Once I have the first layer on, I want to make sure and go back with my paintbrush and push into the eye sockets again, making sure I still have those in place. That's what's going to help me kind of figure out my face shape. Once that piece is on, I'm going to take some watered down glue. This is not only going to solidify the layer that I just put down, but it's going to help me put a new layer on top of that. And here you can see I am using that 1 ply instead of a layered sheet of toilet paper. As I go, there are some points where the toilet paper kind of sticks to my fingers. I just kind of mush it back onto the head form. This is obviously not going to be a perfect process. It's something I'm just kind of trying to figure out and see if it could work. So I'm figuring it out as I go. I put that little piece of paper down so I can tell you how many layers of toilet paper I had put on the head, because I didn't want to show you each and every layer. So at this point I had put on 6 layers. And now I am taking small shapes of toilet paper and putting those on one at a time. By doing this, I'm trying to get specific shapes onto the head, and I kind of looked at some skulls to try and figure out how the head is shaped, and I needed some more volume at the back of the head, so I'm adding these smaller little bits to build that part up. To work on the front of the face, I'm using some of those same shapes, but instead of using the whole shape, I am folding it in half, and this is going to help me build up the front of the face to make the lower part where the mouth is. To get it initially stuck on the head, I just used some glue and then pressed it in. I'm still working with a new camera that I'm trying out, and we're working on the focus here. Once I have that stuck on, I can take some watered down glue and a paintbrush, and I'm just going to kind of smooth it into the existing face. One thing I didn't mention that I need to mention is in between every couple layers of toilet paper, I did make sure that it dried. You don't want too much building up and then not letting it dry because it could create mold. So this process is actually taking a while. What I'm doing now is creating the nose. So I took a long rectangle of toilet paper and I kind of rolled it up, adding some of that watered down glue to the paper as it rolled, and then I'm pinching it at the top and squishing it at the bottom to make a nose shape. To add it onto the face, and this face is dry, so I'm not showing the dry times, but each time you get something you like, I do suggest letting it dry, and it will kind of be like hard as a rock once it's dry. Here's the nose added on. I realized it was a little bit too big, but the nice thing about working with paper is all I have to do is just snip it off and kind of reshape it. And if you work with it while the toilet paper is wet, you can kind of mush it around a little bit like clay, not to the same extent, but you want to make sure that you move it into a position you like before it dries. While the nose was still wet, I wanted to make sure and get some nostrils in there, and she does end up with kind of a large nose, but I think it's a cute nose and very endearing. I also took another tool and just kind of pushed a line for the mouth into the face. I didn't make lips or anything, I just kind of pushed into the existing toilet paper, if that makes sense. To make the eyeballs that go into the eye socket, I'm just using a little bit of paper, adding some glue, and then rolling it into a ball with my finger. I started with a bigger one, it didn't fit, so now I'm using even smaller pieces to put the eyes in the eye socket. Now, if you're doing a 12 scale doll, this does not take a lot of material to do. If you're making a larger doll, I'm sure this process would probably work as well. It just may take a little bit more material. So this one's still a little bit big. It took me a couple tries to get the exact size that I wanted, but once I got it, I added some glue into the eye sockets and placed the eyeballs in there. And then again, I let this dry completely so that the eyeballs were securely in place and were not going to move. After this had dried completely, this is what it was looking like, and I think she's got a pretty sweet face going so far. So I was kind of happy with it and honestly kind of surprised it was working. Now I'm going to add some upper eyelids and lower eyelids. I'm just using some small rectangles of toilet paper, and once I put it over the eye where I think it should go, I'm just going to smooth the rest of the material into the face. Because it's so thin, it smooths in, and in the end, I won't be able to see the seams. It all just kind of mushes together. I'm using mush a lot, the word mush a lot in this video. I'm doing this for the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid, and once everything is smoothed down, I go back with a sculpting tool and push in any details that I felt like I had lost. Then I let it dry completely, absolutely 100% completely, because now I am going to slather her face with wood glue. I'm pretty sure you could do this with Elmer's glue too, but I felt like wood glue would go a lot faster. I used 2 layers of wood glue, and the purpose of this is to make everything very smooth and to give myself a smooth painting surface. And I feel like wood glue does that really, really well. Like I said, I'm sure you can do this with other glue, but it just might take more layers. I'm going to go over her with a skin tone just to give a solid painting surface to start on. One thing I wish I had worked on a little bit more was her neck. I don't think her neck is thick enough, and I end up having to cover up that mistake later on. To start painting the face, I'm going to put down some white for the whites of the eyes, and I wanted to go with a purple theme for her, just her fairiness. I don't know. So I'm making sure that the color of her eye is purple. There's going to be different parts of her that end up purple. And then I'm going back and painting the eyelids. The reason I do this is I feel like I can get much more detail by painting the whites and the colors of the eye first. I also used some gray to do some like eyeshadow detail, and I also put a little gray up in the nostrils for those details to show. Now I'm using some purple to create her eyebrows, and once I have a line in the position with the purple that I like, I'm going to go back with some of the beige to create what looks like little wisps of hair in the purple. I'm also going to use some shaved chalk pastel to give her skin a little bit more interest and a little bit more variation in the color. And this is how she looks. I definitely realized during this process that working with polymer clay is much faster because you're having to wait for each individual layer of glue to dry so that you don't have any molding issues. However, if you're not able to get to polymer clay, you just don't have any at the time, or you can't spend the money on it, this could be an alternative. I was really worried using this process would be difficult when it came to the hands, but the idea I came up with actually worked pretty well. I printed out some hands that were basically 12th scale size, and I just added glue on top of the pictures, and then I started adding layers of toilet paper. And what I'm trying to do here is build up a thickness so that when I cut the hands out, there's some kind of substance to the hands themselves. Now, the one thing I should have done was I should have put the glue on the back, because now it's hard to see to cut out the hands. I do end up making it work, but if you do try this, make sure that your hands are, the printed side is on the other side. I use scissors to start the cutting process. I go around the hands in general, and then I go back with my X-Acto knife to carefully cut out each individual finger. And in the end, I think it gave a pretty good shape. Honestly, these are shaped way better than the hands I usually make with polymer clay, and my hands that I sculpt myself end up really thick, honestly. So I think these came out a lot more dainty. There are still some issues with doing it this way, but I was pleasantly surprised. To create some thickness for the wrists and arms, I took some of that toilet paper and I rolled it up into a tube, adding some watered down glue as I went, and then I just laid it on top of the pieces I already had. To start building up the hands, I looked at my own real hand, and here on the palm of my hand there are some areas that are chunkier than the other bits. So right now, even though I had added several layers of toilet paper, my hands are looking pretty flat. So I'm just going to take like the tiniest bit of material, add glue, and start building up the areas of the hand that need to be chunkier. And I will tell you, this does take a while, but here you can see it does build up and work as long as you're patient and take your time. Once I have it the thickness that I like, I know I will add wood glue onto this, so I am going to add a little thickness with that, so if they're still looking a little flat, it's okay. But before I add the wood glue, I want to shape it into the final shape, because once the wood glue goes on, it will harden and I will not be able to move the fingers anymore. I'm just adding glue to each individual finger, and as it dries, it will like smooth the surface and make a hand. Are you tired of toilet paper yet? I hope not, because now we're going to make the toilet paper wings. No fairy is complete without some wings. I actually give her pretty massive ones here, and I don't know, like I always get confused with the different type of wings when it comes to folklore and fantasy, but I end up liking how they look. And I think if I do end up putting a dragon on the roof, I will give the dragon a matching pair of wings. To start out, I'm using some pipe cleaners, and I decided to go ahead and cut some of the fuzz off. I'm not particular enough to cut all of it off, but just enough of it so that's a little bit skinnier, so when I start to form the wing, it has less fuzz to get around. I'm laying down some wax paper because there's going to be a lot of glue that goes into these wings. To begin, I put down some Elmer's glue, and then I took a wetted paintbrush and went over the glue so that it spread out fairly evenly. I'm laying down one sheet of toilet paper, and then I'm going to put the pipe cleaner down in the shape. Now I kind of bent the wing out because in the end, I want to scrunch it back together to make a very floppy looking wing. So that's why I bent it out of shape for this process. Once I had the pipe cleaner down, I added another layer of toilet paper and then added some watered down glue on top of that. I'm being very gentle because just the slightest wrong move with the paintbrush can cause the toilet paper to rip. So if you do try this and you find that your toilet paper is ripping, I would just let it dry, because once you put down that second layer of toilet paper, it is going to absorb some of the glue underneath it. I would let it dry a little bit if you're having a really hard time with the ripping. I added some more glue after that. I think there were only that little bit of toilet paper that I showed you that I added, and the rest of it is just layers of glue. The reason for this is I want the wings to be fairly transparent and thin, so I want the least amount of paper, and if I feel like I need more layers, I'm just going to add glue to strengthen the wing. Once the wing is dry enough that I can touch it, I'm going to pull it off of the wax paper and cut it out from the toilet paper. I'm using some scissors just to cut around the top of the pipe cleaner. Later on, I will bend that top part over. And the bottom of it, I want to, well, for my particular fairy, since she's older, I want it to look like her wings have just kind of been battered by the years. And so I'm ripping away at the material. And as you can see, I have to pull pretty hard. It gets very strong very quickly. And it's because of this that you need to do these steps before the wing dries completely. As you can see here, because I can still see white of the glue, I know that the wing is not dried completely. I folded down the top part of the wing over the pipe cleaner, and now I'm scrunching up the pipe cleaner wire to make it look like the wing is folded, and this is going to create folds in the wing material. Make sure you like how this looks, because once you let it dry completely overnight, you will not be able to move it again without possibly breaking the wing. Here it is dried, it's very strong, and I'm actually kind of impressed with how strong this material is just being made out of glue and toilet paper. Because she has a purple theme, I just wanted to do a light wash of purple paint, and then I do go back over it again with a wash of black paint, and this is because I just wanted her wings to have that splash of color that I was going for, and I feel like the black kind of gets into the textures and makes the wings look a little bit more aged and worn. Now it's time to put her body together. I'm using some aluminum foil and the very basic shape that I had sketched out earlier. I'm going to crunch the aluminum foil until it is about the size of her torso that I need, and then I can poke the toothpicks through the top of the foil until I feel like her head is in the correct place. And if I can't get it all the way through the aluminum foil, I can always chop the toothpicks off as well. Now I'm just matching it up to my little sketch, and I think she's good, except I do want her to have a little bit of a hunch on her back, not just because she's an older fairy, but also because she would need quite a bit to hold up those wings in the back of her body. To attach her arms, I'm going to be adding another pipe cleaner. I'm just wrapping it around the body that I created, and I'm going to use hot glue as I go to glue the arms in the right spot. A tip for creating arms the right length, your arms width, or your arm span, should be about the same as your height. So if you're trying to make a doll and you can't figure out the arms, the arm span should be the same as the height. To create the form that's going to be underneath her dress, I'm using some chipboard packaging material. I'm cutting it in the general shape that I want the skirt to be, and I'm going to cut 3 of these. 2 of these are going to go together in an X shape, and then the third one I'm going to cut apart, and all of these are going to be glued together to basically make this star shape that will stand up on its own and be the base of my doll, which you will be able to see. So I just cut a slit in these 2, slid them together, and then the other 2 got cut apart to create this piece. And the reason I'm doing this instead of legs, you won't see her legs, and honestly having a piece like this helps her stand up on her own a little better. She won't be able to sit down, but I think it'll be okay. Now I'm adding some hot glue to her person, and I'm going to actually wrap this bottom cardboard piece I made with some more toilet paper. This is going to smooth this form a little bit before I put the fabric on. If I put the fabric straight onto the cardboard, I would probably be seeing the ridges that you are seeing now in the toilet paper. I'm actually going to add 2 layers of this, and then I'm adding some glue on top of that and wetting it down with a wet paintbrush. This is going to act very much like the wing material, and it's going to harden all of this so I have a hard shell for the lower form of her body. This is going to make her a little bit more sturdy for standing up and just lasting through the years. After the toilet paper underskirt is finished, I can kind of reassess her body shape, and I did feel like she was missing a little bit of a bum, so I added some more aluminum foil there, and then I added 1 last sheet of aluminum foil around the entire thing, and this is just going to smooth the top of the body into the bottom of the body. If you're wondering why I didn't use aluminum foil on the skirt part, it's because I couldn't harden it very well, and I was afraid anytime you moved her, you would hear the crunching of aluminum foil. So that's why I only used it on the top, where I knew it would be secured against a hard body. To make sure I have a place to insert the wings, I'm just kind of holding it up, figuring out where it looks best, and I'm taking my X-Acto knife and cutting into the aluminum foil, and then I'm taking a pointy sculpting tool and poking a hole so that I have a clear space to insert the pipe cleaner in once I'm finished. But I'm not putting them on permanently yet because I still need to create her dress. And before I create her dress, I still need to finish her hands. The hands were painted in the same process as the face. I did the base layer of the skin tone and then added some chalk pastel, and I added some purple nail polish. I'm going to be trying to assess where I need to attach the hands so that they look correct, and I'm leaving a little bit of the toilet paper extra on the end to glue it to the pipe cleaner. If I were to do this again, I would actually have more pipe cleaner and less of the toilet paper arm, because the pipe cleaner can bend and the toilet paper, once it's covered with glue, cannot. So I feel like I did limit her movement abilities because of the way I did the arms. I am going to be making her clothes pretty quick and easy, and I am using hot glue. So to start out, I'm using a long rectangle of the skirt fabric, and I'm pushing it onto a line of hot glue at the front of her body. I'm not pushing too hard because I don't want the hot glue to come through the fabric. as I go, I am going to add a little bit of hot glue and then scrunch up the fabric, making sure that I scrunch it more at the top than the bottom. This is going to create some natural wrinkles in her skirt. I want her skirt to look really old and wrinkly. Instead of creating a proper hem on this piece, I'm going to leave it pretty rough because, like I said, I want it to look like this skirt has seen some years. When I get it glued all the way around her body and closed at the back, I'm going to go back with some scissors and I'm cutting around the edge about a ½ inch from the actual bottom of her construction. And I want to show you inside here, I added a nail and a coin that I just glued in there because once her wings are on, she's kind of like back heavy. So I added some weight to the front of her so that she stands up okay. So she has some metal glued up her skirt. I'm using my X-Acto to make the fringe edge of the skirt just a little bit more exaggerated. Now I'm going to be adding some very easy sleeves. I am going to hem the end of the sleeves and then fold it over. This is just a rectangle of material folded over on itself. And then I'm holding it up to her arm to make sure that it is the correct length. It is just a little bit too long here as I have cut it. Once I have that cut to the correct length, I want the sleeves to be a little bit longer at the wrist, so I'm cutting the sleeves on an angle. Once that's done, I'm going to add some glue, fold it over so that I have a permanent sleeve, and because I want the bottom edge to match the hem of the skirt where it's very rough, I'm not folding over that hem, I'm just allowing it to be bare and roughing it up with my X-Acto. Then I glued the sleeve onto her body and we have a working sleeve. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, trying to match them as best as possible. So now I need to do something to cover the middle of her body. I'm taking a different material and I really liked this one because it had just the smallest hint of purple that I thought would complement the rest of her features. I'm going to cut basically a large poncho and that's for later in the video. I'm going to cut this poncho shape and I end up cutting it a little bit thinner, and basically I'm just going to start gluing this down to her body, making wrinkles similar to the way I did with the skirt. I'm just going to start pushing it and pulling it and fitting it so that it looks like a piece of material that she has draped over herself. I felt like the back was just a little bit too long, so I cut it with a point at the end, and I do end up cutting the front pieces as well. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, trying to make sure that I think it would work for her outfit style. One thing I want to make sure is to not put any hot glue over the wing holes that I had previously created in the aluminum foil. As you can see here, I've just taken some hot glue and I'm just pushing the fabric into place. I'm wanting to make sure that I get up under the arms as well, anywhere you can see some of her aluminum foil body showing through. I'm also making sure to rough up the edges like the rest of the outfit. And now I'm basically done with this part, but I do want to make sure and recut the holes for the wings. For this, I'm just puncturing through the fabric and then taking a larger sculpting tool and pushing that through the fabric as well so that I can see the wings clearly. I'm still not permanently attaching the wings because I want to do her hair before I do that, but yeah. Oh, this is where I had to fix my neck mistake. I just decided to make her shawl look a little bit more like a turtleneck because I felt like her neck was too thin for her head. So that's how I decided to fix that. Now I'm going to take a trick that I have seen from some doll remaking channels like Dollightful. They have used yarn to create hair. Previously I've used viscose, but I didn't have any purple viscose and I wanted her to have purple hair, but I did have purple yarn thanks to my sister, and so I decided to try it out. And basically I think you're just supposed to comb it out. And I don't know if it was just this yarn, but I was having a hard time with that. So I did struggle with it a little bit and I kept getting the waviness, and I wanted her to kind of have straight hair, so I tried to wet it down and then comb it out again. Anyway, in the end, I'm sure there's a lot of people who know how to do this better than me. In the end, I got enough to do her hair, but it was kind of a learning process, but I think I probably will use it again. To create her hairstyle, I just added some of the yarn to some tacky glue I put at the base of the back of her skull. Once that dried, I flipped that bit up and I'm going to glue it on the top of her scalp. This is how I'm starting to make her hairdo. And this is just going to make her look a little better from the back. When I push that bit of yarn down in the front, I want to make sure and get it as flat as possible because I am going to be adding more hair to the top of her scalp to complete her hairdo. Once that's completely dry, I'm going to take this long piece that I somehow magically was able to get from the purple yarn, and I'm going to spin it in my fingers until it kind of spins upon itself and creates this kind of mini bun. And then I'm going to cut off the edges, and it's actually just going to basically be glued straight onto her scalp. And I've never really made a hairdo like this, but it was probably one of the easiest I've ever created because I just spun it, cut it where I didn't want extra yarn sticking out, and glued it onto her head. I did go around and make sure if there was anything sticking out that I added that back in. I then made a smaller bun using the same method and then glued that on top of the little bun. And now I really like this little hairdo. It kind of looks Victorian and just like she has really long purple hair that she piled up on top of her head. And now the time has finally come to add the wings permanently. Before I add glue onto the pipe cleaners, I want to make sure that the holes are working and the pipe cleaner goes in there very easily. And then I go back and just add a little bit of glue onto the end and push them into her body. I let it dry, and once it's dry, I can kind of rearrange them so that they look correct. So this is our fairy hanging out in the cardboard house. I think she likes it even though she has a permanent look of annoyedness. I did have my patrons name her, so I will put her name on the screen now. Thank you guys for naming her. Let me know in the comments what you guys think her story is. Why is she annoyed? Why is she in the cardboard house? Is she actually some sort of dragon instead of a fairy? Let me know. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you really enjoyed it, and if you are going to make your own recyclable material toilet paper fairy, please make sure to tag me on Instagram or post it on Facebook. I would love to see what you create. One thing I want to add in here, if for your specific cardboard house you're not interested in a fairy, I highly suggest the YouTube channel Where the Gnomes Live. This channel is run by an amazing artist and she makes all sorts of things. She has an entire room full of trees and little houses and everything she makes with homemade materials. She also makes little gnomes and creatures that live inside these places. So if you're interested in making some other kind of creature, you need to go check out her channel, see what she's creating. She also makes these trees with like facial features in them, and they're just stunning. So please go check out Sharon's channel, Where the Gnomes Live. She is amazing. Last thing I want to say before I end the video is I have received several things for the captain in my P.O. box. I will be getting back to the captain's quarters soon, but I just want to let you know that I have them. I'm not ignoring or not going to the post office. I'm going every week to make sure that I get anything that's there. So thank you so much if you have sent something. I will be getting back to that project in the next couple videos. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Hi everybody.